Hello everyone, welcome to my history of the Democratic People's Republic of China, better known as China. I need a whole YouTube channel to make a history video for China, but I have to cram it into 10 minutes. Oh, and a little disclaimer, I'll do my best with the pronunciations. Let's get this show on the road, shall we? On May 1st, 1965, geologist Shang discovered the fossilized feet of the Liu man. These dated to be 1.75 million years old, making them the oldest bones in China and East Asia. This marks the beginning of the explosion of complexity that we call the history of China. In 1929, outside of Beijing, at the Zhoukoudian prehistoric site, the skull of the so-called Peking man was found. It was dated to be 750,000 years old and is one of the most famous skulls ever found, up there with Lucy. Around 5000 BCE, or 7,000 years ago, the first real culture in China began. We call it the Baishan culture today. Near the present-day city of Linyi, pottery made by these people was found. Later, they mysteriously disappeared without a trace, just like journalists do in China almost every day today. Around 2070 BCE, the disputedly possibly non-existent Shia Dynasty was established by the legendary Yu the Great. The founding story is kind of crazy. It involves two dragon gods, which were half human and half dragon, and they're interesting looking, let's just say. By 1600 BCE, if the Shia Dynasty really existed, it would have ended by now. At about 1600 BCE, the first proven dynasty of China, the Qing Dynasty, began. The Qings are remembered for their bronze work today. At around 1050 BCE, the leaders of the Shang Dynasty became really corrupt, which is what ended the dynasty. Next came the Zhou Dynasty, which was a pretty peaceful dynasty, especially for China. This allowed Confucianism and Tao, or Taoism, to be created. The dynasty was created in 1046 BCE and lasted all the way until 256 BCE. The Zhou dynasty at one time was very briefly violent, but it was by far not the most chaotic of dynasties. The Zhou dynasty was ended by the Warring States period. Well, what do you think those states did? Would you guys fight wars? From 400 BCE to 235 BCE, that's a rough estimation by me, China was hit by the Warring States period, where 7 dynasties wanted to unify China under their own rule. Can you guess of the 7 above who won? If you guessed the Qin Dynasty, you'd be correct. Actually, now they're the Qin Empire. Founded by Qin Shi Huang, this empire unified China for the first time of many. Eventually, Qin Shi Huang wanted eternal life. How did he plan on getting this? Drinking mercury. That wasn't such a good idea, and it killed him. 3 years later, the Qin Empire fell. After his death, he was buried in a tomb, which is literally thought to be guarded by traps, including water traps, bows and arrows which will shoot at you automatically somehow, and rivers of mercury. Now that is crazy. His tomb is still sealed today and hasn't been unsealed yet. His tomb is surrounded by the famous 8,000 terracotta soldiers, which each actually represent a real person who actually lived. In 206 BCE, the Han Dynasty began, replacing the Qin Empire. This dynasty is what I'd argue is the most important empire of Chinese history. The people of this empire created so many things we can't live without today, including paper, bridges, wheelbarrows, and the concept of weaving, which became important in the Silk Road. This empire lasted roughly 400 years and ended in the year 220 CE. There's BCE, and after is the year 1 CE. We live in 2020 CE. Anyways, China then shattered into 6 kingdoms. In 581, China was reunited under the Sui Dynasty. The Sui Dynasty is only remembered for adopting Buddhism as China's religion. Other than that, it really didn't do anything. This dynasty fell in 618. In 618, the Qing Dynasty was founded. During its 300-year-long tenure, the first criminal code was made, the oldest book, at least printed, was made, and China became the largest country in the world in terms of population at this time. The Tang Empire fell in 907, with China splitting up once again. After the brief 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, which is the name for the period after the Tang Dynasty fell, the Song Dynasty came to power and united China once again. The Song are remembered for many inventions, including the use of banknotes in government. They probably invented compasses, and they actually invented forensic science, just not the same level of technology, obviously. The Song Dynasty was ended in 1279 with the invasion of everyone's favorite Asian conqueror, the Mongols. In 1279, the Mongols got past the Great Wall of China, which was built by the Qin, which I didn't mention for some reason, but anyways. In 1279, the Mongols conquered the Song Dynasty and established their own dynasty, which we now call the Yuan Dynasty, which really didn't do anything but kill ethnic Chinese people. It fell in 1368, and the Chinese then came back into power. In 1368, the Mongol/Yuan dynasty was ended by the Ming, who then began the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty was a very important one. The Ming made the second largest encyclopedia in the world, which was only beaten in 2007 by Wikipedia. The Ming also invented porcelain and toothbrushes, oddly enough. And lastly, the Ming built the world-famous Forbidden City, which is located in Beijing. The Ming Dynasty fell in 1644 to China's final dynasty, the Qing. In 1644, the Qing Dynasty was founded. The Qing Dynasty interacted with the rest of the world and stopped China's kind of isolationism, although it wasn't as extreme as Japan's. This was a first for China. From 1839 to 1860, the Qing Dynasty and the British fought in the famous Opium Wars, which was fought over the British throwing a hissy fit that the Chinese were trying to not get addicted to opium, which was a drug. It was a Qing defeat, and opium was then traded with the Chinese whether they liked it or not. In 1911, imperial rule, which had been ruling China for 6,000 years, was ended in 1911 by the Republic of China. But this certainly must not be the case. The Republic of China must have ended, seeing who rules China today. It did. Find out how in... You guys knew this war was coming. What war? The Chinese Civil War, of course. From 1927 and 1950, the Republic of China and the Communist Party fought in the Chinese Civil War. Around 3 million people died. It was a communist victory, causing the nationalists to flee to Formosa, which they renamed Taiwan, and the communists to take over the mainland. This causes the dispute between China and Taiwan, which I'm thankfully not going to have to get into in this video. In 2012, Xi Jinping became the dictator president of the Democratic People's Republic of China. And with that, that is my history of China. Thank you all so much for watching. I know that only would have gently tapped the top of the iceberg that is the history of China, but at last I have to end. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope you thought this was good enough. Coming up next is the Deutschland, aka Germany, is coming up next. Thank you all so much for watching.